Ahoy! Halloween is right around the corner, and you don't have a costume. Well, worry not, because the Captain is here to offer you a very simple solution. Something you can do at home, provided you have 4 days to get it done. It starts with this. An inexpensive plastic mask I picked up at a drugstore. With very simple materials, you can change this into something that's uniquely you. Well, since the Captain has this year-round chin warmer, I'm going to cut the mask with a pair of scissors along this lip line. But if you don't have any facial hair, keep the entire mask.
There's nothing worse than seeing someone with a beard wearing a full face mask and you see the hair sticking out underneath the jawline. It's really disturbing and weird. But if you don't have facial hair, I do recommend keeping the entire mask because you can do some really cool stuff with the mouth area and the chin area that I can't.
See? This way I get to keep my beard, and yet the whole top of my face will be creepy and scary. But do you know what I think? I think I need a creepy, horrible eye. And for that, I'll use a ping pong ball.
So I'm holding the ping pong ball in a rag. You can use a towel or an oven mitt or something. You just don't want your bare fingers next to the blades. So I'm going to very carefully rock the blade back and forth, and I puncture the ping pong ball, and I start cutting it as carefully as I can in half. So, I mean, you can cut along the seam if that makes you feel better. You can cut through the logo. And then once it's cut in half, you take one of the hemispheres, and again, putting it in your hand, holding it with a towel, you press the point of the scissors up against your finger. You can feel it, but underneath the towel. Please don't do this with your bare finger. And then rock the blade back and forth. And then at a certain point, you can feel the blade coming through. You pull your finger away, and then just twisting the blade back and forth. You put a hole in your ping pong ball that you can see through, because you're going to want to be able to see through your eye.
So before I can glue the ping pong ball or anything to this mask, you'll notice it's very, very smooth. And ordinarily when you're doing woodwork or anything and you start sanding things, you sand it to make it smooth. But if you use coarse sandpaper, you can actually rough up the surface of something, make it rougher. Because what we want is we want a mechanical bond. We want the scratches in the plastic to actually grip the glue and anything else that we put, the paint or anything we want to put on this mask. So you got to rough it up first. So I have some 60 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to sand this mask now. Ready? Let's start sanding. Okay, now the entire surface is sanded. You can see it has little fine scratches all over it, which, like I said, we're going to act like a little binding thing. Now, what you'll notice is the mask is really flimsy. It's really, and working on it's going to be a real problem. So, unless you have access to, a head cast or a wig block that you can take the mask and stick it to, this is what my solution is. I took a bunch of newspapers, and if you don't know what newspapers are, ask your grandfather or grandmother. And using masking tape, I just made a big form that I wrapped with a plastic bag, a grocery bag. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to stick it on here, and using a little masking tape, I am going to attach the mask onto this form. And for the rest of the time, I'll be working off of this form.
Okay, just using masking tape, I'm taping the plastic mask onto the little kind of head form that I've made. If you have, again, a head cast, plaster head cast or a polyfoam head cast, you can certainly use that. And if you have a wig block, you can do the same. The only problem is that sometimes wig blocks are a little more narrow than your head, and if you put the mask on top of a wig block and you make the mask too narrow, then it might actually pinch your head. So you want to make sure that your head form is approximately the size of your head, okay? It's now time to glue the ping pong ball onto the mask, and for that I'm going to use super glue. But the Captain's going to show you a trick using a household ingredient, baking soda. So if I were to take this and just glue it here, you'd see that it's only contacting the mask down there
and right there. It's just 2 spots, which would probably be okay. But I'm going to cut a little piece off the top of this ping pong ball so it sits in a little. So I'm going to take this. I'm just going to cut just a little bit like this. You'll see. Like a little roundy bit like that. So now, see, I've cut that little wedge out of it and put that like that. See how there's more now? There's more contacting. So now I'm going to take a little baking soda. I'm going to put it right along the edge of the ping pong ball. And then I'm going to take my bottle of super glue. And I'm going to super glue that right along the edge. And then take a little more baking soda and put it right on top of the super glue there. And it forms like an instant cement. Now I'm going to blow out the excess. Okay, that's great. Now we'll do the bottom, same thing. A little baking soda right along the bottom. A little super glue right there on top of the baking soda. And then just a little more baking soda. And I'm just using just wooden coffee stir sticks. If you have a little tiny spatula or anything you can use, it's perfect. X-Acto knife, whatever you have. Blow the excess off, and now that's on there like cement. So in order to alter the features of this mask, I'm going to use instant paper mache. Now this you can get at any hobby store, Michael's or Hobby Lobby or any place like that. Or if you'd rather mix your own, there are recipes on the internet you can find for making paper mache clay, or sometimes it's called paper mache mulch or pulp. In any case, it takes about 15 minutes to mix it completely. And the best way to do it is in a plastic bag, and you put the water and the paper mache in there, and you knead and you knead and you knead for about 15 minutes. Once it's all done and it's nice and squishy like this, then it's ready to use. So we can start taking it and putting it on our mask. Okay, so you see, you pull off a piece like this, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this to me, so you'll look over my shoulder in a minute, but I'm going to start by putting some really kind of evil brows on this, and I have to also make sure that my eye is covered.
Yes, I've elected to use paper mache rather than cotton and latex. I mean, you could, in theory, use cotton and latex to build up your forms. Or you could also take, when this paper mache is finished, you could take like tissue paper and latex or tissue paper and white glue to add a second surface of skin onto it. But again, you're adding time to your schedule, and I'm trying to get this knocked out in a couple of days so I have it ready for Halloween. Sculpting in cellular clay, it's a lot like, it's a cross between sculpting in bread dough and wet toilet paper. So it's not the same as sculpting in clay. It's a little more challenging, but you know, you get used to it, and it's the thing that you want to try to avoid is making it too thick or making it too wet. Now, I've wet my fingers there to smooth out some of the forms, but you want to do that as little as possible, because obviously the more water that is in your paper mache, the longer it's going to take to set. So we want to use as little water as possible. We want to, get the forms on there as best we can, smooth them out as best we can. Now, to sculpt fine details and things, if you have wooden sculpting tools, that's great. Here I'm just using a wooden coffee stir stick, and as you can see, I'm kind of rolling the tool across the surface to make wrinkles and things.
Okay, so we're finished now, and depending on how dry it is and how warm it is, this could take a day or two to completely set, completely dry the paper mache pulp. So you don't want to cover this with plastic. You want to let it sit out someplace safe. Make sure that you don't set it up like this. Make sure that it's sitting, flat up on the table. In fact, I'm going to put mine down just like this, and that way, in a couple of days, I'll come back, it will all be dry, and we'll paint it. All right? Ahoy! Welcome back! So it's been 2 days that our mask has been drying, and to be perfectly honest with you, It was pretty dry yesterday. I could have worked on it yesterday, but just to make sure, we've given it 2 days, and so now you can take a look at it. So, because this is paper mache, it is paper, you might see some shrinking, a little cracking here and there. It's not to worry. We sanded the whole surface of the mask. Everything is stuck to it, and once we put our acrylic paint over it, which is what I'm painting this with, it'll act as an extra adhesion. It's really going to kind of hold the whole thing together. And look at the texture. Some people might look at that texture and go, oh my gosh, it's too rough, but the Captain sees nothing but opportunity. So we've done all the hard work. Now it's time to have some fun. Time to decorate our mask. And to start, we'll paint it.
Just using a 1-inch brush, I'm using acrylic, which is like right down the middle purple. It's not too red, not too blue, because prior to painting this, I figured out what I wanted the final paint job to look like, which I strongly recommend you do. And think about what the darkest tone, the darkest color you want the shadows to look like, what color you want in the wrinkles, whether it's a brown or a black or a blue, or if you're painting something that's green, think about reds and maroons, and just paint that all over the piece.
Okay, so as you can see, I've put a uniform base coat of purple acrylic paint on this. Now, I know you're probably thinking, what? But the way I'm going to paint this is I'm going to dry brush this, because this has so many textures and wrinkles and things. We really want to show them off. So if I was like painting with an airbrush or doing any fine detailing work, it really wouldn't take advantage of this really coarse texture, where dry brushing will. And dry brushing is exactly what you think it is. I'm going to take some paint onto a brush, and I'm going to just brush it into the palette until it starts getting a little dry, and then I'm going to just take that semi-dry brush and start hitting all the highlights. Okay? So the next color I'm going to use is kind of a blue-green teal. And because this is so dark, I've added a little white to it, so it really kind of brings out the brightness. Alright? Let's start dry brushing.
I can't stress enough that you really need to work the brush into the palette. You know, and as you see, I brushed it onto the form first, just to make sure that any excess paint was off. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep that purple color in all the deep recesses and just start adding this, well, in this case, teal color in layers on top of the high points. And what you're going to do is you're just trying to carefully just whisk this brush back and forth, you know, over the mask. And again, tapping out as much extra paint as you can, making it as dry as you possibly can, and then going after it. And then, and you'll see here in a minute that once it's, you know, uniformly done, I add a little white to my palette, because you want to start putting successively brighter colors on, dry brushing brighter colors on, and hitting just the high points with those brighter colors. So, as you can see here, like around the nose and around the cheekbones and things, you really want those areas to pop. So, adding a little more white to your teal color, you do that. Now, around the eyes, I wanted there to be some red, like a bloodshotty red, so I took a fine brush and some acrylic, some red acrylic, and I just went ahead and lined around the eyes, and I made sure that the entire eyelid area was painted red. Now, in order to do the upper lid, I found it was really necessary to actually turn the whole piece upside down. So, you know, don't be afraid of spinning it around.
Okay, so now we have built up our layers of paint on the skin, but we still have to address two things. The eye is number one. And I'm going to be honest, the Captain cheated a little bit, and I had some leftover clay. So what I did was I just rolled out some cool teeth and I painted them, because we're going to put some teeth along the bottom here as well. We'll use the same super glue baking soda technique for that. Now, but to paint the eye, well, I'm going to try to keep it kind of monstrous, even though my real eye, which we'll be looking at here, won't be. It'll be kind of cool to have a really good contrast. And so I'm going to do some painting, and then we're going to cover this with 5-minute epoxy. So I'm going to show you now how I'm going to do that.
I used a stencil, and I'm going to cheat and use a Mark-a-Lot to do the pupil of the eye. So I carefully draw that pupil onto the ping pong ball, and then fill in all the black. And what you want to make sure you do is you take your felt pen and you go inside of that hole as well, as you see I'm doing here, just to make sure that it's black. And carefully remove it, and then again using acrylics and a fine brush, I start using lighter colors and I radiate the lighter colors, starting at the pupil and working my way to the outside of the eye. And of course, don't forget the bloodshot veins.
All right. Okay. So I finished painting the eye with acrylics. You saw me take the little stencil and use a Sharpie for the pupil area, but the rest is just painted with acrylics. You can paint your eye any way you want. You can put a cat eye if you want, or however you want to do it. But now, to make it glossy, to give it a wet look, I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy, which you can get at any hardware store. Sometimes it comes in like a little dual syringe, because it's an A and B component that you mix together. In this case, I have 2 little bottles, so I'm going to mix up some 5-minute epoxy, and I'm going to drizzle it on this eye. Okay?
So I use the top of a small wax cup for mixing my 5-minute epoxy, and with a coffee stir stick, I just start putting it on the eye as best I can. As you can see, it doesn't flow very well, so you really got to kind of guide it around. But like everything, you know, it will start to flow and drip. And I wanted to make sure I got some on the lower lids and the upper lids, you know, just to make it all look wet and gooey and gross. And the great thing is, in 5 minutes, it sets. And be warned, over time, it will yellow.
Okay, so the 5-minute epoxy is setting. And we're in the home stretch here. We're almost done. I just want to add some hair, like eyebrows, and maybe a little hair on his upper lip to kind of blend in with my own. And then we'll glue the teeth in with super glue like we did the ping pong ball. But for the hair, I'm going to use some crepe wool. And you can get this at any makeup store, any makeup supply store. It's and you straighten it by getting it wet in hot water and just stretching it out. It comes in a braid. And generally the people at the store will kind of help you understand that. And I'm going to glue it to the mask with just some white glue. So I'm going to start putting the hair on now.
So I'm applying the white glue with my finger. If you have a brush, you can use a brush. Just know that that brush will be ruined forever. And then, as you see, I take just a small pull of that, really thin pull of that crepe wool, and using the scissors, I clip the end of it off there, and I push the hair into the glue using the outside of the blade of the scissor, and then I cut off the excess and then take that excess and place it right next to it. Now, the rule of this is you really should work from the outside in, no matter what you're doing. So you work from the bottom of the beard up, you work from the bottom of the mustache up, and same thing with the eyebrows. You know, you just take a small little section and you trim the end of it off. With the eyebrows, I tend to go a little thicker when I start putting the hair on, and make sure the glue is on there really well. And that's another thing too. What I do is I put the glue on with my finger, and then I tap the glue. And as you tap the glue, you can actually feel it starting to get tacky. It starts to dry, you know, in the air. So you get it really good and tacky before you start laying the hair in. And then, like I said, using the back blade of the scissor, you go ahead and just start laying in layer after layer. And it's really important, when it's all dry, trim it back. I know that, you know, you want to leave it long, and if that's the styling of your creature, that's great, but do trim it back.
So I have the glue dried, and I've gone in and I've trimmed the hair down as much as I could, because you don't want the eyebrows and whatever you do to overshadow the incredible work you've done. So I've trimmed it all up. So now it's just like an indication. You saw how hairy it was before when I first started putting the hair on it? That's all you need, just a little indication of hair. So now I'm going to glue the teeth in, and then we'll be finished. Okay, so I've trimmed up all of the hair, the eyebrows and the mustache, now that it's dry, and I super glued the teeth in with the same method that I did on the ping pong ball. I took a little super glue and a little baking soda, and it turned into instant cement, so now the teeth are in place. So now it's time to take it off the form, and we'll try it on. Now remember what I said about the tape? I'm just taking the scissors and I'm just going underneath and I'm just cutting the tape. Careful not to cut the elastic bands there at the top here. Just cutting it, and you can kind of feel the plastic with the blade of the scissors, and please be careful, please be careful. Okay, and then on this side. Okay, and right here in the bottom. Looks pretty good. Okay, so now we'll just try to take it off here. Oops. Just tear a piece of tape off there. Whoopsie. That's okay. We're good. We're good to go. Okay, here we go. Ready? There's that. Ooh, that's nice. Let's get rid of this. You ready?
So, your mask is complete. Now you're ready to go out. But wait a minute. Let's try this out. Hold on. Where is he? Shh.
McAllister, tea time already? McAllister, you're a pain in my posterior profundus. If I still had a posterior profundus. Wake me for tea.
I should have known that was going to happen. Oh, I know. I'll go get the goblin. See you next time.
Oh?